All things die, and all things live forever. But our task is to die making roads over the sea. That's a poem by Antonio Machado, the Spanish poet, in a translation by Robert Bly from the book Times Alone, Selected Poems of Antonio Machado, published by Wesleyan University Press. I'm not a Spanish speaker, but let's give it a shot just so we remember that this is, in fact, in Spanish. Todo pasa y todo queda, pero lo nuestro es pasar. Pasar haciendo caminos, caminos sobre la mar. All things die, and all things live forever. But our task is to die making roads over the sea. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Thanks for dwelling in this story a little bit with me. I love this story. I love the Green Knight who shows up. He's just a guy painted green, that's all, with a little holly there in his hand. And then he gets his head cut off, and he's just fine. So he's an otherworldly being. He has come to challenge the court, and it's not a challenge from an earthly personage, it seems, but from the other world, the magical world, the place in which we have our roots, in which all things in this conscious day world that we live in have their roots. I love that moment. And then there's the bedroom. I love that as well. It's hilarious, isn't it? It's hilarious. This wild scene where everything is soft sheets and gentleness and the question and the answer and pastel light, I imagine. And then it's juxtaposed, it's mashed up against this brutal killing of the animals, the boar, the deer. We're going after the females, the Lord of the Forest says, and they kill and butcher those deer. The guts are brought steaming into the winter air, and then back to the bedroom. Beautiful calmness, softness. It's hilarious, and it's very dangerous as well. And it is meaningful, not just funny, but there's something there. One is an analogy for the other. The hunt, the sexual hunt, and the physical, we're going to eat some food hunt. It's all there. And it's there, I should say, in the original poem. This is based on a poem written in the 14th century called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And so I'm telling it in my own way, but I haven't changed the details much. And the poem itself revels in this mashup of these two realms, the hunting of the animals and the scene in the bedroom with Sir Gawain and the lady there. So that moment also sings and stings me in a wild way. And please enter this poem, enter this story. The door is open. This isn't like an episode of a TV show you watch and you turn it off and you go on to the next one. This is a realm you can enter and inhabit and dwell within. It is a way of seeing the world. It is a world itself. And I invite you to enter this story and find out where it tickles you or prods you or pokes you or clobbers you on the head, because that is important. That's where the wisdom is. That is your route into the forest. And there are 1,000 routes into any forest. This story seems to have something to say, and it's not quite clear. It's mysterious, it's magical, and I wouldn't want to change any details of it. And I love that it is not quite clear. This earthly King Arthur who demands a wonder, and a wonder comes, and it seems to have something to teach him and the court and Sir Gawain about the green power of this earth, spring and summer, and about love and about death as well. This story should not be confused with like a code. It's not secret code for something else. It's not something which could be better said or explained in a better way if we just had the right words for it. It's like a dream, and it is perfect as it is. But nevertheless, we can hike in there and look around a little bit in a way with our hearts and with our minds and with our whole bodies as well. And when we do that, I would mention some of the things I've dug up in learning about this story. One of them is that there is a goddess in Irish mythology called Morrigan. She is a goddess of battle and war and strife, Morrigan. She can change shape, and she frequently takes the form of a crow. And crows haunt the battlefields, of course. When there are dead men there, there is food for those crows to eat. So she appears in the Táin, which is a huge Irish saga, and she appears in Irish mythology in many forms. And in the Arthurian cycle, she takes on the shape of Morgan le Fay, Morgan the fairy, Morgan the Fay one, who is in this story as the old woman in the castle in the pine woods there in the depths of the forest, who some say is directing the whole action. Some say she is the one who makes the spell so that the Green Knight loses his head and he's just fine. And she's the one who is prodding and prompting and challenging the court of Arthur. That is one way to look at this story. For the gods in Celtic mythology, in that worldview, are frequently not frequently, they are our ancestors. They aren't powers above us necessarily, but they are the ones who came first and who we are descended from. So Morgan le Fay is linked to the goddess of battle. And then Sir Gawain and the Green Knight are both there as well. And it seems to be that there is an old pagan ritual or ritual understanding, rather, in which each year is like a king, and this king is killed at the end of the year and a new king arrives. So this story is very explicit about its calendar, about its temporal details. The feast in the beginning happens on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, the longest night of the year. And the new year is born after that. And it seems perhaps that the king of the old year is seeking someone to take his place, and Gawain takes up that challenge. This is not to explain away this story, but to go deeper into its mysteries and its shadows and its fogs. For it is not an equation which all adds up to a certain number, but a place to inhabit and live in. Gawain refuses that. He does not sleep with the Lord of the Forest's wife there, and he remains an earthly man, perhaps, we should think of from that. I don't know, but I love the fact that he refuses desire and the joys of the body in that way for the good of the realm, it seems, for the good of the kingdom. If he were to sleep with this woman, what would happen? Well, he'd come to blows with the Lord of the Forest, at least, and the honor of King Arthur's court would be stained. Maybe that's a Puritan way of looking at it, but I don't think so. I don't think it is. Because as adults, we need to be aware of desire and aware of how to rein it in and to let it out both. And that is something which the knights of Arthur's court supposedly know. They have sworn to protect the weak and to protect, that includes all kinds of people, but to crusade for ladies. That's explicit. I mean, call it an old world thing that ladies need to be rescued if you want to. But nevertheless, that is what they have sworn. Unlike other heroes in stories who are just out for their own gain, for the gold or for whatever, the knights of King Arthur's court, they're going to defend the weak, which includes all kinds of people, but also includes ladies. And frequently it is women that they are, they would wear the sleeve or the scarf of the woman on their outfit because they are riding into battle, remembering the goddess who they are fighting for. They are serving the goddess. Does that go down a little better? I guess it goes down a little better for me, because I don't like thinking that women need to be constantly rescued. And there are plenty burly, powerful, snarly women in the Arthurian cycle. Let's not get confused about that. But the Knights of the Round Table are frequently serving a goddess of some kind. Guinevere as well is descended from a goddess. But that's another story for another time. But I love the fact that Sir Gawain must master his own desires in this story. And it's also looking at the larger Arthurian cycle. I mean, let's back out a little bit. Let's get a little cosmic view. Let's look at the big map here. The entire Arthurian cycle is concerned with this question. And it begins in a wild love affair, and it is brought down by a wild love affair. At the very beginning, this is the footnote, at the very beginning of the whole Arthurian story, we've got Uther Pendragon, who's the big king, and he falls in love or lust, depending on how you look at it, with Igraine, who is already married, unfortunately, to this guy Gorlois, Duke of Cornwall. Well, Uther enlists Merlin's help with magic, and he takes on the shape of Gorlois, and he sleeps with Igraine, and King Arthur is born. So the whole thing, the whole story begins with a man's love for a woman who is already married. You know, not so good, bad, not good. But that is somehow necessary. At least Merlin seems to think so. At least the Lady of the Lake seems to think so, who later gives Arthur his sword, a magical sword, as if the land itself, as if the goddess of the land itself were agreeing to this situation, this strangely broken human situation in which Uther sleeps with Igraine, who is not his wife. So that's how the whole thing begins. And then we get Mordred midway through the Arthurian cycle. That's Arthur's son by his half-sister, Morgause. Mordred, who is not acknowledged by his father in the way he wants to be acknowledged, and so is permanently angry with his dad. Yeah, there are people like that out there. I don't need to tell you that. So then that's in the middle. And then at the end, we're just taking the big picture here, as you can see. We don't want to look at a toadstool. We want to look at the whole forest. At the end of the Arthurian cycle, of course, Lancelot, the best knight, the most knightliest knight, the best warrior of all the King Arthur's knights, he falls in love with Guinevere, Arthur's wife and the queen. And it is kept, everybody knows about it, but nobody says it. And this goes on for a long time until, of course, Mordred exposes the truth in public, and bad things happen and people die. And the Round Table, the Fellowship of the Round Table is destroyed. Mordred and Arthur both die, and many good knights die as well. So that's just to say, I find it immensely moving that this whole cycle is concerned in some ways with love and desire and lust, and how those are put in balance with a social order, with marriage, but also with a kingdom. And I find it very moving that this story, Gawain and the Green Knight, happens. And in this story, those powers which are given to us, humans on this earth, men and women that we are, those powers of eros and of love and desire are dealt with by Gawain in a way that's almost like some kind of yoga. He masters his desires. He realizes he is more than that, perhaps. And maybe he's just saving his own skin. Maybe he just doesn't want to go in too deep. Maybe he's being nice to Mr. Bertram there, Lord of the Forest. But he does not give in and sleep with the lady there. And as a result, he survives and he lives. And the court is tested. King Arthur's knights are tested, and they pass that test. Because there is at least one among them who can put up with this and not cross the line. So, yeah, I'm not telling you how to feel about this story by any means. But I'm just spilling my guts. I'm telling you how I feel about it, because I guess I'm the one here doing the podcast. So, yeah, I just find that very sad and beautiful that in this story it's dealt with one way, but in the entire cycle it becomes a tragedy. A tragedy. And who among us has not felt those powers in our lives? And then, of course, there's this curious and deep connection with the natural world. The holly, which is brought in by the Green Knight and also by Sir Gawain. And I am told holly shelters the sprouts of oak, the saplings of oak trees in the forest, shelters them from snow and things like that so they can be allowed to grow, which is, if true, a marvelous thing. And the greenness of holly, of course. It is super green. It's the greenest thing you can think of in our climate, pretty much, and it stays green in the winter. So that power is brought into the court there in a beautiful way. Those are some of the doors into this story. Those are some of the doors back out of it again into our lives, which happen in the forest and in the court as well. William Blake, the poet, said, "Eternity is in love with the productions of time." And perhaps the forces of the other world, the magical, eternal forces, have a certain love affair with the cup which breaks, with the moment which goes, with the humans who live and die, and perhaps go to sleep forever. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you have thoughts about it, send me an email. My website has more stories on it, and contact info, jayleeming.com, jayleeming.com. There are more stories there as well. Thank you to the Patreon supporters who make this happen. If you were able to join them, that is awesome, because it helps get story out into the world. Snow is falling on the forest, in that forest of pine trees. I am creating this podcast in August, surrounded by the simmering noise of cicadas in the trees, that wild shimmer, like a great chant they give every summer, surrounded by the greenness of this season. And I'm thinking about the snow and the green power of spring and summer, and the snow and the darkness and the sleep which comes to us in the year. And the great wheel of the year turns, and we ride and live on that wheel. And outside right now it is hot, and the day is sizzling in the pan of the sun's heat. Take care and be well.